Hey everybody, welcome to part 3 of our series on marriage. Thanks so much for joining us. Today we're back in the book of Hosea. Yesterday we were in Leviticus, but we're back in Hosea. If you want to turn to it, I'm actually going to be in chapter 4, and there's just one verse, verse 18. Now, if you want to read the whole thing, it is really good. And if you read it and look at it through the lens of someone, one spouse married to another spouse, and at least in the book of Hosea's case, it's one spouse is doing everything right, and that's God, and the other one is not doing everything so right, and that's for different reasons. And in verse 18, God kind of digs down into what might be driving that through this one phrase that says, they loved shame. This is verse 18 of chapter 4. They love shame more than honor. They love shame more than honor. Now, I kind of wrestled with that phrase at first because I was like, what does that mean? Like, who would love shame more than honor? But here's the conclusion I came to. I feel like this is what God said to me. Shame is something about you. Honor is something about somebody else. So it starts with thinking more about yourself than somebody else. A great example that Jesus gave in the Gospels is when he told the parable, the story of somebody who came to a dinner party and sat at the head of the table, but then had to be asked to move down, to the back of the table. That was not as much a place of honor. So that person kind of brought shame on themselves because of the way they chose to act or handle a situation. He said, instead, what you should do is go to a dinner party and sit at the end of the table, the place of least honor, so that somebody will come by, hopefully, and say, hey, no, you can move up to a better seat. You can absolutely move to a better seat, and then you are honored in front of everybody else. Does that make sense? So what you do is you pick the thing that honors everybody else, and that's going to give you honor, instead of picking the thing that honors you, which is oftentimes going to give you shame. So here's an example from me in my personal life and ministry. When I first went to Taiwan, I was a missionary in Taiwan for 7 years. And I was 22 years old. I was very young. I had a website, gochangetheworld.com, and I was on fire, and I was going to be radical for Jesus. And there was a pastor at the church that I was serving at, and he was a native to Taiwan. And he had been a pastor for a long time and knew what he was doing. I didn't think he knew what he was doing, though. I thought only I knew what I was doing. And I was going to be radical for Jesus, and nobody else was passionate enough about Jesus, and nobody else was, going far enough. And I would get on my knees on the sidewalk of a busy street, and I would worship out loud, my headphones on my ears, and probably just scare and annoy most people around me. And the pastor was really cool. He didn't say, don't do that, but he did ask me to kind of fall in line and help out with a bunch of different ministries that he had in mind for me, and I didn't think were radical enough. The point is, I came to his church and I sat at the front of the table saying, oh, I know everything that's going on. And I kind of got asked eventually, both by God and a little bit by him, to move more to the back of the table. Instead of going there and having honor for somebody else, instead of honor for my ideas and myself, right? Instead of going there and sitting at the back of the table and then showing myself to be, a learner, a listener, a hard worker, passionate, caring, a lover of God, a lover of people, and then being asked to move up. So now we got to apply this to marriage, and it's kind of an obvious application, right? But what we do is we get in these conversations with our spouse. We get in these sometimes arguments with our spouse, these disagreements with our spouse, and they say they're right, and we say we're right, or they think we're wrong, we think they're wrong, or whatever it might be. Well, the best way to handle it, this is the best way I can say it. Too many times in relationships, whether it's with our parents, our best friend, or as we're talking about with our spouse, we think we're operating in an arena of a court of law, okay? And it's an argument about who's right and who's wrong. And it can be proven, and I can prove it to you. And until I've proven it to you, we're at a stalemate. But the deal is, particularly in marriage, we're not operating in a court of law. We're operating in an arena of love. And in that arena of love, that might sound very kind of like 70s Wild Child, right? Flower Child. But it's true. We're operating in an arena of love where love wins out. Whoever loves more is going to win out the day. Because it's all based on love. It's all based on grace. That's what God's saying in Hosea. He's saying this whole thing, this whole relationship, at the end of the day, you totally turned your back on me, and I've been totally good to you. So you don't deserve my grace, but I'm going to give it to you overwhelmingly. He uses the word overwhelmingly because he knows that in that relationship, he's not operating in a court of law. He's operating in an arena of love, right? And so the way to operate in there, and that we should be operating in there with God, toward God, and that we should operate towards our spouses is to always assume honor for them, not honor for us. Honor for us often leads to shame because there's been plenty of times in my marriage where I go, I am so right on this. I'm going to let her know how right I am. I'm going to hold on to my rightness and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, I wasn't really right, or it certainly wasn't worth it. But oftentimes it just wasn't right. And that sitting at the head of the table leads to shame, and I move to the back of the table, and I got to go say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. But if we go in with honor and we say, man, to ourselves, right? I don't know if she's right or I'm right, or I don't feel she's right at all, or whatever it is, but I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to lead with that. We're not in a court of law. I'm going to lead with honor. I'm going to lead with honor. If we lead with honor, if we sit at the back of the table, then we've got a chance of being moved up. Then we've got a chance of honoring them and being honored. And that's an equation for a fantastic marriage, a fantastic relationship. All right, we'll talk to you again in part 4. Bye.